certainly a highly unlikely scenario.
Is this just virtue signalling then, taking out tools but saying, look, we can reintroduce them if we need to?
No, I think I've always also been really clear that the COVID-19 Public Health Response Act is an extraordinary piece of legislation, and it's one that does give the government of the day unprecedented powers to do things, and therefore it should only be available to the government as long as there's a genuine emergency situation. Countries that have far less respect for the rule of law and far less respect for democracy have these sorts of laws on their statute books on an ongoing basis. That's not something that we should have in New Zealand. So as soon as we're in a position where we can't justify the emergency nature of some of the powers, then they should be removed, and that's exactly what we're going to do. And that's not unprecedented. We had unprecedented emergency response powers after the Christchurch earthquake. As soon as we got past the emergency phase of that was watered down. So we're following a similar process here.
In terms of the new pandemic legislation,
other political parties have called for an inquiry into the COVID response for months now. So why have you ignored those up until this point before deciding that yes, you will have an inquiry?
Well, no, we certainly haven't ignored them. What we've always said is that we wanted to get past the emergency response phase. We wanted to get through winter, and then that would be the appropriate time. Bearing in mind that the people who are going to have to respond to a commission of inquiry, whatever form that takes, are also the people who have been on the front lines dealing with the pandemic. And so we want to give them some clarity so that they can actually engage in whatever form the inquiry takes.
Thank you, Minister.
Right, I'll get out of the way.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all right, just gave me a fright. Are you happy to see the next lockdown?
Oh, look, every New Zealander, I think, is pleased to see us coming into that new phase, as we have been for some time, of COVID management.
You need to do an inquiry effectively before you scrap the COVID legislation altogether.
As we've said for some time, we do think that we need to go back and look at as a whole at our experience from COVID. We know, unfortunately, that in the future we're likely to face other pandemics. We need to learn from this one and make sure, like civil defence, we have a set of arrangements ready to go for whatever circumstances arise.
Prime Minister, how much responsibility does the government need to take for the new inflation figure out today, given non-tradable inflation has actually risen over that period?
Take into account, though, of course, when you look at non-tradable inflation, for instance, across things like construction, 90% still of goods used in that area are imported, and so you see that crossover. Looking around the world, New Zealand is one of the few countries where we're starting to see it peak and come away. We are rare in that regard. Many other countries it continues to increase, and that's because of those global pressures we're seeing.
Have you got a message for the Reserve Bank?
No, and given their independence I wouldn't. But I do have a message for New Zealanders. We know it's tough, and that's why right through to the beginning of next year we've kept that reduction of fuel at the pump, half-price public transport, that increase in the family tax credit, all around trying to just ease that pressure.
Prime Minister, did you know that Damien O'Connor had met with Barbara Kuriga about her family's involvement in the ongoing dispute with MPI?
No, couldn't speak specifically on that.
No, so he didn't tell you that?
No, and nor would I expect necessarily for him to tell me about every interaction with an opposition spokesperson in his area.
Well, do you think it's strange that he wouldn't tell you about something like that, given the conflict of interest or perceived conflict of interest?
No, not necessarily, no.
And when did you know about the Mike Heron investigation?
When some of these things were publicly reported.
When did New Zealand get
I will just make sure, and then I'll finish with you, Jim.
New Zealand get bivalent vaccines?
Sorry?
When will New Zealand get bivalent vaccines?
Yeah, look, this is one of the things that we continue to get clinical advice around. So that's where we're guided by our doctors, our clinicians, on what's needed to provide the greatest protection for our population. I haven't received advice on future vaccine purchases at this stage. I couldn't give you that timeline then at this stage, but the team keeps abreast of what's necessary for the variants that are coming through, but probably a question best placed for Minister Hipkins at this time.
A car damaged by a pothole?
A car damaged by a pothole? Certainly not in recent times, no. Thanks, everyone.